The story of this book begins in 2001, when I left academe and began working as a high school teacher. In the process of trying to plan the first semester of a U.S. history survey, I made a curious discovery after generating a slate of movies I planned to show over the course of the fall semester. Every one of them starred Daniel Day-Lewis. There was The Crucible, and Last of the Mohicans, and The Age of Innocence. Later I added Gangs of New York and There Will Be Blood. All told, there were 9 times I ran an annual event I dubbed the Daniel Day-Lewis Film Festival. Maybe it's not surprising that my predilections would express themselves without conscious effort. But keep in mind that we're talking about Daniel Day-Lewis here. As anyone vaguely familiar with his work knows, Day-Lewis is legendary for the extraordinary variety of characters he has played and the vertiginous psychological depth with which he has played them. I first became aware of Day-Lewis in early 1985, when, in the space of a week, I watched him portray the priggish Cecil Vyse in the Tony Merchant Ivory film adaptation of E.M. Forster's Room with a View, and then saw him play Johnny, the punk East End homosexual, in Stephen Frears's brilliantly brash My Beautiful Laundrette. Day-Lewis went on to have a distinguished career, winning an Academy Award for his portrayal of the handicapped Irish poet Christy Brown in My Left Foot in 1989. But between 1988 and 2007, he played a string of American figures that ranged from a 17th century Puritan to a 20th century art collector. What could this mean, I wondered? Every year, like clockwork, I watched these films again with my students, marveling at the inexhaustible nuances of Day-Lewis's performances. Gradually, I discerned a thread that connected the Puritan, the gangster, the pioneer, and the lawyer. But perhaps the more important outcome of the experience is that it got me thinking. Could it make sense to think of actors as historians? That people in the process of doing a job whose primary focus was not thinking in terms of an interpretation of the past were nevertheless performing one? And in that doing so repeatedly over the course of a career, they would articulate an interpretive version of American history as a whole? Of course, such people are aware of when they're dealing with historical situations, or contemporary situations with historical resonances, and may make real effort to exercise historical imagination as part of their work. But that's the point. It's part of their work. We all understand that there are many people out there who do history without writing books, archivists, curators, and of course filmmakers, including documentarians as well as writers and directors of feature films, who work consciously and conceptually to craft an interpretive experience for their audiences. What intrigues me about actors, though, is the obvious limitations and obstacles to executing a purely historical function. Their work is always embedded in a larger context in which their control of the material is limited. Actors do not typically write their own lines, and their craft is collaborative, part of enterprises that will always be as much aesthetic and commercial as they will be historical. Now, I must acknowledge that there is less to the distinction I'm making than meets the eye. Archivists, curators, and documentary filmmakers also labor under limitations of various kinds. They collaborate. They embark on enterprises that are very often aesthetic and commercial too. They can't afford not to. So do academic historians. But there's a powerful mythology surrounding academic work. A mythology that extends, for example, to procedures for hiring and promotion at research universities, that suggests scholarship should exist outside such considerations, that it has its own intrinsic value and should be pursued independently of them. This is a powerful proposition, and it has led to work of enormous value that has enriched our understanding of the past. I'd never want to see it go away, and understand it cannot be taken for granted in a society under great financial pressure and long-standing anti-intellectual influences. But I'm after something a little different, to apprehend the way history is absorbed into the fabric of everyday life. Messy, fragmented, more suggestive than direct. In the words of one scholar who has compared cinematic history with more traditional kinds, its point is not to have a point, but to point. In the ensuing pages I follow such cues, tracing sometimes faint and always contestable master narratives as they emerge in bodies of work.
To keep listening to this audiobook for free, click the link in the description. It will take you to a free Audible trial where you can listen to this and many other books for free for 30 days.